Hey guys, Bryan Karp, aka Mailbox Money, with my co-host, the man, the myth, the legend, the professor, Anthony Loffredo. And we are here on the Brick to Brick podcast. This podcast is for you if you're a brand new investor who's looking to purchase their first house hack, or you're a seasoned real estate investor with a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio. You're going to enjoy hearing the inside information that we get from all of our guests. On this podcast, we interview brokers, investors, developers, property management companies, syndicators, any piece of buy and hold real estate. Brian Truman, thank you, sir, for being on the Brick to Brick podcast. We are so excited to have an opportunity to chop it up with one of the top, and I don't want to say I'm biased, one of my favorite multifamily brokers in all of Tennessee. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it. It's great to be on with you guys.
Awesome. So we're going to dive right in. I know that you've been in real estate for a number of years. Just give me a little background about what you focus on in real estate, and just give me a quick little, first comic book of Brian.
Okay. Yeah, my focus is helping investors both buy and sell multifamily. That's all I've done in the 8 years that I've been in commercial real estate. And real quick story of how I started focusing on multifamily was probably not even a month after I got my license. I got a call from a gentleman in California who was looking for some multifamily and kind of, came to find out, trying to figure out how he found me and all that, but trying to figure out kind of who he was. He happened to be Grant Cardone's right-hand man at the time. And so that kind of started my trajectory into nothing but multifamily because, as they say, the way to the many is through the one. And that happened to be the one guy that I was fortunate enough to meet immediately, who has introduced me to a lot of people. So,
Brian, what made you go into real estate? Because knowing you on a personal level, I know that you had a whole career before real estate. Tell me a little bit about that, and then what bit you about multifamily, which is Anthony and my obsession.
Yeah. So I spent right out of college. My degree in college was sports broadcasting. So right out of college, I spent.
Is it true that you had your own sports show? Is that all those rumors true?
Actually, I spent the first 4 years out of college as a sports broadcaster for NBC network out in Salt Lake City, and so I covered the Utah Jazz, and that was back in the days of the heydays of. Michael Jordans and Larry Birds and Charles Barkley and, Karl Malone, John Stockton, those guys from that standpoint of covering the Utah Jazz. So I had the opportunity many, many years ago to interview all those famous athletes. But then after that, I actually ended up moving just because there really is no stability in that kind of in that kind of a field. I moved into government contracting. So I spent 22 years in government contracting, traveling all 50 states and some foreign countries, things like that. And then when I decided to retire out of that, I started a business brokerage company here in Nashville from scratch. And within 5 years, had grown it to be the largest one here. Had a company out of Minnesota approach me about wanting to buy it. And so I told them, my business is always for sale for the right price. So they got to the right price about 6 months later, and I had signed ownership over to them, and then went into real estate only because at that time I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and my wife was a commercial realtor. So I was like, hey, I'll just get my license and then maybe do a little bit of dabbling, and then came about the story I was just telling you about with the gentleman that was Grant Cardone's right-hand man. And he wanted to buy multifamily because he was had sold property in California, doing a 1031, needed stuff immediately. And that's how it all started.
That's awesome. I had no idea about the business brokerage side. That is so interesting. What are some of like the most interesting businesses that you ever brokeraged?
So that is an interesting and to let you know, so I signed a 3-year non-compete once I sold it. Once that 3 years was over, we started to back up again. So we have our real estate company, but we also still have our business brokerage company up and running as well. But as far as businesses, we've sold a little bit of everything from manufacturing, companies, really anything, Brian, anything under about 15 million, and then you kind of start getting into some M&A work and we let the big guys handle all of that kind of stuff. So we've done, everything from restaurants all the way up to manufacturing companies and, everything in between. So.
Awesome. Terrific. Give us a little state of where you see the multifamily market right now, right? This podcast is all about multifamily and building generational wealth and buy and hold real estate. So tell us what's happening right now, almost December 2024 in the multifamily market. What are you seeing? Because that's really why I wanted you.
Yeah. Well, right now, I think the investors are very excited. The day after the election, Wednesday morning, I woke up and my cell phone was just dinging from investors texting me, and the only thing their text said was LFG. So so let's go. Let's go. So the investor sentiment is really strong of wanting to get out there and get investing. I think interest rates, be interesting to see. Obviously, there was a half a point, and then the 25 basis points. Jay Powell sounds like maybe he's not too excited, maybe to drop them a whole lot more. So, but that little bit has certainly piqued the interest, and now it's just helping sellers get to the right mindset on where pricing should be.
You've unpack that for me, right? So as somebody who, is a syndicator and a buy and hold real estate investor, how in the world do you try to let's even break it down less than that. How do you evaluate multifamily real estate? And then how do you convince a seller what the value should be?
Yeah, so that's a great point. I spend a lot of time, probably 2 hours a day, doing cold calling to owners of properties. And so the conversation always immediately, comes back, especially some of these owners that have owned properties for, 10 years or more. They're still in the mindset of, what it was like back in, 1920 or back in the, 2020 or 2021 before interest rates kind of went crazy, right? So they still have that mindset. So it's all about educating them on where the market is, and I can easily send them, information on, based on where their rates are or their rents are, based on what their financials are. We can get information off of Yardi and CoStar that helps us provide the education to them to say, okay, here's rents, here's what your numbers are, here's what interest rates are. So, and then sharing with them, what the value is and what they can sell that property for. I'm very much a straight shooter with these, with these sellers or owners. If they tell me, hey, I don't want to sell, I don't need to sell, I'm like, then don't sell. So I'm just looking for the ones that, are in that position where they want to sell, they may need to sell. They may have partnership, as I call them, partnership divorces. Partnerships aren't working. And so, somebody wants out, or they've just owned it 10 or 15 years and they're ready to move on. So I just help them set realistic expectations of what the market is, where it is, and what it looks like now compared to either when they bought or a lot of them heard, from back in 2020 that, man, I can get this kind of money for my property. But it's all about setting the right expectations.
I think it's all expectations, right? I think that's the whole thing. The biggest thing I see on the resi side and commercial side, in the game that I play, is that everybody thinks that their property is worth $3 million or $5 million. And I'm sure you see it, especially if it's multifamily, like, oh my God, this is worth a fortune. But there's really a way to evaluate it, right, Anthony? How do you evaluate it?
Well, like Brian said, you got to understand what the cost is to the new buyer, right? So their valuation from 2020, when the rates were 3%, they're still stuck in that mindset that if they had the opportunity to get rid of it, say at $100,000 a door, now all of a sudden it's worth 70 or 80. They can't. They don't want to hear that, right? They still want, hey, I still want that opportunity that I had years ago, so I'm not letting it go unless it's somewhere near there, and the numbers just flat out don't work, right? So that's one of the biggest things, right, Ryan? I mean, that would bridge that gap between the seller's expectations and what the reality is of what the value of the property is.
Yeah.
So, and like you said, with the rates now, yeah, it's good because now everybody wants to jump back into business and all of that post-election. However, when that does happen, you're going to see inflation potentially kick back up. So that's going to keep the rate stagnant. So it's going to be a wait and see thing over the next few months on whether or not the Fed's going to kind of stick to that. Let's keep knocking the rates down, or, kind of keep the rates where they are, depending on the inflation report, right? So the inflation came out yesterday or the day before on Wednesday, and it ticked up a little bit. So, and now that's before the sentiment of, hey, the economy is going to pick back up and da-da-da-da. So you might see a pullback from the Fed as far as whether or not they're going to continue to kind of be aggressive on the rate cuts. So again, that'll keep those rates right where they are, and that'll still keep that gap between the expectation of the seller and where the buyer can actually meet, based on the mortgage rates.
Well, I think you made a great point, Anthony, when you said, for the expectation for the seller is, okay, what is this costing for the new buyer to get in, right?
Right.
Here's what their cost of funds is now compared to.
Yeah, and in this space, there's nothing emotional, right? We're kind of used to the single family stuff where there's emotions on one. There's no emotions in this game. It's all numbers. So if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and if this doesn't work for the seller, it doesn't work for the seller. There's very few emotions involved. So, bridging the gap is tough.
Brian, are most of the sellers that you're speaking to, are they professional investors and syndicators like Anthony and myself, or are they one-off? This has been passed down generation to generation, and who's like the avatar of most of the people you're speaking in, and then let's talk about in the different markets from a tertiary to a secondary market.
Yeah, the majority probably that we talk to, because we really kind of specialize in that probably 40 to 150 unit type product instead of the 200 and 300. And in that it's a lot of usually the majority anyway is a lot of can be mom and pops or maybe it's a partnership of just JV. It's usually not all the way to syndication. And so that's a lot of the folks that we're talking to. You do get into some of the syndicators on some of the deals that we are talking to and owners, but for the most part it is it's mom and pops to maybe just a couple of partners that are joint ventured on it.
Those mom and pops are the ones that, if it's been in the family for a long time and it got passed down, those are the ones where it's easier to kind of set those expectations to reality. The ones that owned it, 4 or 5 years ago, put in a business strategy, they're not going to exit, because their cost basis is so much higher.
Right. Yep.
So, Brian, when I speak to someone on the residential side that wants to sell a house, I always ask them during our conversation, what's your expectation of price? When you say that to a seller for the multifamily space, do they just throw out numbers? Do they say, I want 50 a door, 75 a door, 100 a door? Or they're always like putting it back on you for the evaluation?
They, so yeah, I'll kind of ask them because I want to see where their mindset is at the time. And sometimes they'll throw out a number. A lot of times they will say, it's been so long since I've looked at what my property is worth, and which is what I love to hear, because then it allows me to be able to say, hey, here, let me send you the comps and the numbers for your area. That way, then we usually don't have to fight a big battle of pricing.
Let's unpack that because some of the listeners on this show are brand new real estate investors, and some of them are obviously much more sophisticated. When you say the comps on resi stuff, and everyone knows this, we're going to look at similar houses that sold. On the multifamily, are you looking at similar complexes, or is it how is it priced?
Yeah, so good question, and I should unpack that more. I'm assuming, I assume too much sometimes that as far as what people may know and not know. But yeah, so we have access to data as brokers for Yardi and CoStar, which are, a little bit different than what you have on single family homes. But that gives us data for other complexes in that area, whether it's in a more metropolitan area or even in, tertiary market, right? It'll tell us, what the properties last sold for, but it also tells us, what the rents are in those areas. So when I do get ready to have that conversation, even when I ask them, what are you expecting price? I've already researched their property that I'm calling them about, right? So I know exactly where pricing should be, but yeah, we run comps on, on properties that, have recently sold, but also we look at the numbers from, what their current rents are, because Yardi will tell us what their rents are at that complex, right? So, and then we can do some math on, because if you take an expense ratio of 45%, we can come up to a pretty good idea of what the price on that property should be. And so, so when we have that conversation, I already know ahead of time where I think the pricing should be. But, to your point where you like to say, hey, what was your expectation on price?
Yeah.
Then how much of a battle you have to fight, or how much education you need to provide them. I guess I look at it as more of educated them than
right
battle. But
yeah, they need to know exactly how the buyer, where their mindset is, right? So regardless of their expectation based on whatever their parameters might be, this is how you have to look at it from the seller. The seller, the purchaser, is taking your numbers, they're backing into a valuation, and then that's probably where you're going to be at regardless.
Yeah. And so the to that point, it's, if they say, well, hey, I'm expecting, or I'm thinking this kind of a price, then I don't even say, well, you're way off. I just start talking to them. I'm like, in your area, this is what has sold. This is what rents are there. We're seeing rents of yours is this, and so based on that, and I'm sure your expense ratio, I haven't seen your exact numbers, but your expense ratio is probably, 45%. And so, based on what the cost of funds are for the buyer, realistic pricing would be this, right? So I just kind of walk them through that, that process to make it so it's not a, adversarial, well, that's what you want. Here's what, it should be. And, you're crazy for thinking that number. I just try to, just walk them through and be very, very upfront and very, real with them. So.
Do you ever tell them, okay, if this is the amount that you're looking for, here's what you need to do to get to that valuation? Maybe figure out a way to reduce expenses, or maybe clean up some units and get the rents up. Because I see a lot of times what comes across our desk is, they'll say, oh, well, 40 units, they renovated 10 of them, right? So they could increase that rent. And that's probably where their mind says, hey, we want to get to this number. What do we have to do in order to make it make sense for the new buyer to pay this amount, and then kind of back into it that way? Is that something that you typically will tell them if their expectations are way off from what the reality is?
Yeah, I'll just basically say, hey, if this is what your pricing is, this is where you sit today, in order to get to that price, you would need to go through and renovate all of your units, and they would need to look like a Class 8, property, but we're sitting, at a Class B minus or, C plus. And so, that's part of that educating at the, at the front end too, is that, prices, here's what prices look like for Class A, here's what they are for B, and here's what they are for, C. So, yeah.
Brian, you are a master of getting offers accepted or getting offers to stick out when there's a sea of offers. Can you unpack a little bit of what you do special and how you're able to get your offer accepted opposed to someone else who has made an offer?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brian. The key for us is working with, buyers such as, like you guys, right? Is basically I work with my buyers to help them understand that here's what you need to do to kind of set yourself apart from all the other buyers, out there, right? I want them to be able to send me kind of what I call a real estate resume of who they are, what they're about, what they've done, their experience and all of that. And so that helps me sell them to the seller of that property, helps me sell the buyer to the seller of that property by saying, here's, I'll just use you guys, Bryan and Anthony, here's them, this is who they are, this is what they've done, this is their experience, this is, this is why you'll want to, why you want to use and choose their offer, because, in working with buyers such as yourself, some of the things I tell them, here's the two biggest things you want to make sure that you are. Number one, you want to be a closer. Number two, you don't want to be what we call a serial retrader, trying to retrade on every little thing. And
like renegotiate is what you mean.
Renegotiate. Yeah. Okay. That's what retrading means. Yeah. Renegotiating on every, some people will just try to throw out an LOI or something, get something under contract, but that's not even close to the price that they want to buy the property for. Now there are what I call retradable offenses. If you get in, you see there's structural issues or, there are things that are retradable, but you want to try to kind of, imagine some of that stuff in your pricing, but, to help distinguish it. So I will, basically send the buyer's real estate resume and kind of a story and a narrative about them with the offer, so that way the seller, says, okay, here's Bryan and Anthony. This is what they look like. Here's Brian Truman. Nothing got sent. I don't know this guy from Adam. I don't know if he has any experience. I don't know what he's done in the past. I don't want, and so you can help your sellers or help your buyers stand out over, the other offers that are being sent them. Because I guarantee you, other brokers don't do what we do to try to help our buyers stand out.
Without a doubt. And I think that's one of the things that you guys specialize in, being a mom and pop brokerage and a more niche brokerage, that you're able to have your buyers stand out from the crowd, because opposed to resi, which I always go back to resi because I think that that's like the standard, is in resi, home sellers literally just care about the money. They don't care about the buyer, who they are, the strength of them. And selfishly, can you give a little story how we got in touch with you and how we got your attention?
Yeah, and this is great because you know, I use you guys all the time. So, you know, there's groups that have me come and speak, real estate groups all over Tennessee, and some other states will have me come and speak to their groups, and being on podcasts and things like that. I use you guys as a perfect example, right? Is, you know, you guys heard me on a podcast, the old Capital podcast, the guys out of Dallas, just kind of talking about, you know, how to stand out, and Tennessee a little bit. You guys reached out to me and said, "Hey, we heard you on this podcast." So then you guys, not only did you send me that real estate resume, which I, you know, just talked about, you guys sent me a video, right, of the two of you. You know, and the title of the video, I don't know if we can use this on air, but it was hilarious.
Anything on here? It's my podcast.
Yeah, there was title of the video was who the fuck are these guys? And you know, so it definitely, you know, stood out, right? And but what you talked about on there was perfect, you know. And so for me as a broker, I looked at that and I was like, man, these guys are good. Not only did they send me a resume, but they sent me a video. And let me tell you, as a broker, you know, if I get a property in this area, who are the first people I'm going to call? You know, I mean, you guys shot right to the top, right? Of, you know, because of, I mean, you guys stood out so much compared to other people, you know, because of that. You know, I have a lot of people send me their real estate resume, but no, I've never had anybody until you guys send me a video like that, right? And so it definitely helped you stand out, definitely put you right at the top. And you know, and so I use you guys as a perfect example of what, you know, what buyers need to do to stand out. Because as brokers, you know, we're getting calls all the time, you know, and they may call us and say, "Hey, Brian, this is my name, and we're multifamily investors, and we're looking for Class C and, you know, 50 units, and can you add us to your list?" And then that's it, you know. And so in my mind, I'm like, okay, if I get 4 or 5 of those a week, you know, by come the end of the month, am I going to remember who called me at the very beginning of the month, right?
Brian, I want to be on your list. I want to be in your favorites, right?
Yeah.
I want to be your wife, your kids, and then Anthony and Brian, right? So I don't want to be on a list. Don't put me on a list. Be on your favorite in your phone.
Right. That's what I'm saying with you. What you guys did, it obviously, you know, made it go, okay, these guys are right at the top of the list here. So,
Brian, I also think it's important to state is Anthony and myself were never in the Tennessee market, and we were never syndicators before, even though we both have extensive portfolios here in Long Island. So what we also did was, after we got in touch with Brian, we flew down to Tennessee with no properties in mind, just to, Brian, finish the story for me, just to hand him over some
bagels, fresh New York bagels. It was awesome. So, yeah, again, I mean, it was memorable all the way around that you guys actually took the initiative and were proactive and flew down to meet us and bring us fresh New York bagels. So yeah, you guys are the poster child for how you should do it.
Getting the attention. Right. Enough patting myself and Anthony on the back. You specialized also in motel conversions into multifamily. I've always been interested in it. Explain how it works, and, you know, unpack it for us and the listeners.
Okay. Yeah. So, and I think you're going to have Kanal on your podcast as well, right? Yeah. And I may want to leave that to him. I think he's going to talk about some of that, from there. So I don't necessarily want to steal his thunder, but yeah, we've done a number of those where there are groups that do specialize in taking some of the, maybe it used to be an extended stay or something like that, that some of them have, kitchenettes already built in them. Some of them don't, but they take those and they convert those to studio apartments. But it's a lot for affordable housing. And I think that's kind of what all I think is wants to cover some of when he's on with you guys as well. So
Perfect.
maybe I'll leave that, but that is so you hear the thing of repurposing properties, right? So that's what that whole hotel to apartment, it can be for affordable housing, could be for workforce housing, but it's just repurposing, a older maybe hotel and make it, something that can be very profitable for people, for investors.
So, Brian, you did mention earlier, regarding some of your sellers about getting the properties from a B class to an A class. So, if you can, just again, for the listeners that might not be as familiar with everything, what are the differences between the A class, the B class, and the C class properties?
Yeah, Class A is, a lot of times people think of Class A, it's more of like a, downtown Nashville, where it has, granite countertops and all the high end, amenities and
Pools, gyms, right?
all of that, right? The high end finishes and everything else. That's Class A. Class B is more of your workforce housing. Maybe people that work, industrial, manufacturing plants. But it can also be, your nurses and things of that sort, right? And then and a lot of Class B are properties that are fairly stabilized, so there's usually not a lot of deferred maintenance. And then Class C is the stuff where you hear the term value add. Value add means that you want to go in and renovate, maybe, but value add can also mean that there's an opportunity to take that in and increase some efficiencies, whether it's expense the expense numbers and things like that, right? So that's the Class A, B, and C model. It all depends on where people, if somebody's not into a lot of value add, then Class B is going to be better for them than a Class C value add. But your value add is usually where you can turn around and make your most profit.
Create some equity.
Yeah, but you have to look at too on the value add to say, okay, how much, if you're in a location, if you want to take it from a C to an A, are you going to be able to get the rent difference that an A would be out of it, right? So you do as much value add as you feel like you're going to be able to get rent out of it, right? So sometimes it doesn't make sense to go from a C to an A if you're not in an area where you're going to be able to get that kind of rent.
Right. You kind of have a ceiling for the location and the size of the apartment. No matter what you do, you're going to get to a certain level. So you kind of want to figure out how much do I need to add in order to get there. But like you said, not go over, because then you're kind of just, wasting money at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Brian, I know that you are, I know you're a movie buff, and I know 007. So, but I want you to tell me your favorite scene or exact movie, but also compare it because you remind me very similar to them with your creative financing. So I think that that's something else that you really, set yourself apart from the other brokers that I've met and spoken to. So can you give me an analogy of your favorite 007 movie and some of your creative financing?
So I love James Bond. I just went to a real estate event where they had a little they had a silent auction and they had some James Bond stuff. there. And, so it had, but there was a poster and it had all the people that played Bond, from, I mean, you name it, Daniel Craig to Pierce Brosnan to Roger Moore to, everybody, even the ones you could never remember. From that, and I loved that one because it had everybody. But just real quick on the creative financing, because I know we're running out of time here real quick, but I'm big on creative. When I say creative financing, and it's almost, creative offers, right? Because we're talking about in the market where we sit with interest rates and all that and looking at sellers' expectations. I'm all about offering multiple options when you do offers, right? So maybe it's one that's just traditional, conventional. Maybe it's conventional with some owner financing, and so always have something where your offer has basically three different options for the seller to look at. Because even if the seller says we don't want to do owner financing, if they look at the numbers, that might be able to help their tax burden a little bit, sometimes they will, they'll go for that, right? So
I love it. I know you have a hard stop, so I want to thank you a million times for being on the Brick to Brick podcast. But most importantly, even though I don't want to share you with anyone else, I believe in abundance. So where can all of New York, all of the listeners across the United States, where can they find Brian Truman? Give them your website, your social media, give them everything. And then we're going to put it out in all the show notes.
First of all, I'll give you my phone number. It's 615-260-2121. And I'm one of those brokers that has a reputation. I'll answer my phone any time of day or night. So
it's unbelievable. That's how we got Brian. He literally put his cell phone on one of the biggest podcasts in the multifamily space. Okay.
Yeah. So my email is Brian Brian .Truman TRUMAN @svn.com. I'm on Facebook as Brian Truman. On Instagram, brian.truman.accelcre. So Excel. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. So, please reach out, contact us. We'll be glad to help you right after Brian and Anthony.
They might have bigger pockets, Brian. We're in that 20 to 50 or 60 units. So maybe we'll want 2,000. Again, thank you so much, and we really, really appreciate it, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay. All right, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it, and we got some more stuff coming your way. So
can't wait. We're hungry.
All right, thanks.
If you guys are enjoying this content, like, subscribe, write us a comment, or share this show. This content is 100% free, and it's all for you guys. We need you to spread the word. And remember, on the Brick to Brick Multifamily Podcast, we don't want you guys to look rich. We want you to become wealthy with buy and hold real estate.